6:39, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Matthew Hurtt joins us from Virginia, where I'm assuming, Matthew, you are out there just watching what's going on, people going in to vote and so forth. It was interesting, Matthew. Somebody asked me a question, 2386, asking, if Tennessee is red, then why does it matter? And so red, I think is part of what he said. Why does our vote matter? My point is that, number one, sheer numbers do matter because it's a point. And if we want an election that is seen as a mandate, then we need the massive numbers of people to go out and vote for Donald Trump. That's number one. Number two, we love Tennessee being red. And one thing that we cannot do is become complacent. And so there's a lot of people reacting to his question, why do we need to go out and vote if Tennessee is so red? Anyway, Matthew, how's it going in Virginia?
You know, Dan, Tennessee is red, but it won't be red for long if there's complacency.
Yep.
I'm from Rutherford County, and I can tell you right now, the Rutherford County GOP is a pretty complacent organization, not doing half the stuff that we're doing in Arlington, where Joe Biden got 80% of the vote in 2020. I've been up since 4 a.m. Eastern time. I'm outside Dawson Terrace polling location, which you may recall was the polling location that I encountered that angry gentleman last year. The whole reason you and I have spoken on this program almost every week for the last year, we've got dozens of poll greeters across Arlington who are interacting with voters, and we've got a good response. The polls opened at 6 a.m. Eastern time, and I handed my first Republican sample ballot to a voter at 5:59 a.m., and I'm excited. There's a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and I think we are on the right track to have a good evening.
All right, so a couple of things real quick. I know that there are a lot of people that were looking at Virginia as, holy crap, Donald Trump is actually making inroads in Virginia. Any insight you can give us here since we last spoke 24 hours ago?
Internal polling from the Trump campaign has Virginia within 2 points. If it is within 2 points, and I believe that it is, then we're going to see Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, all favorable to Donald Trump. But, you know, we've got a gubernatorial election in Virginia next year, and if Donald Trump comes within 2 points here, then we know where the benchmark is. 4 years ago, Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden by 10 points in Virginia. So if it's within 2 points, that's an 8-point swing, and it means that the work that we're doing on the ground, that local Republican committees have to do, that the state party has to do, that our candidates have to do, is important work, and it means what we're doing is the right thing, and we will keep at it, especially in a place like Arlington, where we do get a lot of raw Republican votes for statewide races. And so we deliver those votes for statewide candidates, statewide races for U.S. Senate, for governor, for lieutenant governor, and attorney general here. And that gives us a benchmark for next year and for years going forward.
Matthew Hurtt joins us on Super Talk 99.7. Matthew, so let's talk about, obviously it is November 5th. It is Tuesday. It is election day. But let's talk about what we know about early voting and how the Republicans have been doing in early voting. Now, I've heard so many different things. I've heard that the Republicans and early voting has been very good. I've heard, though, that the Democrats have been better, but I've also heard that the Democrats are nowhere near where they were in 2020. As in early voting. 2020, of course, we had a couple of other things, dealing with a pandemic and so forth. But, I guess my question is, from an early voting and a number standpoint, are there indications that the Republicans heeded our call to early vote, and how does that compare to the Democrats?
In states like Pennsylvania, in states like Wisconsin, North Carolina, Republicans did heed the call. But what is important is we didn't cannibalize our election day voters. The Trump campaign focused on no propensity voters, so those voters who are registered to vote, but they do not vote in any election. And we see in Virginia that modeled Republican voters, which are zero propensity, they've never voted, but they're registered to vote, we're beating Democrats 2-1. Democrats are not turning out to the extent that they have in the past.
Now, when you say, hey, hold on. When you say, is that in Virginia or across the nation?
Across the nation. If you look at, there's a really great Twitter or X account called L2 Data, and they're tracking these swing states, and the numbers are very good. Again, on those low propensity and no propensity voters. Christian Hines is another X account. He's Virginia based, but he's been tracking numbers in Virginia and Pennsylvania. And last night in an X space, he was totally blown away by what he sees in Pennsylvania. The depression of turnout in a place like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, but also the dramatic increase across the rest of Pennsylvania for modeled Republicans in Virginia, but we know the party affiliation in a state like Pennsylvania, and those Republican voters are coming out.
Matthew Hurtt is joining us. It's been interesting to watch Donald Trump and this journey, this incredible journey, Matthew, that he has been on, where he, of course, announced that he was running for president. He's been vilified. He's been called Adolf Hitler again. Of course, we all know about the lawfare, the attempts to keep him off the ballot, the attempts to throw him in jail. He's also made friends with his former enemies. Megyn Kelly, I've got some great audio from her coming up. But it's been interesting to the assassination attempts, of course. And so Trump last night, I don't know if you have heard any of the audio from Donald Trump and how he sounded last night. I thought that he sounded as strong on the last day as he did on day one. Seems to me like he started early. Not so sure about, he started off really good and he ended really good as well. I'm not sure if I can say the same thing for Kamala Harris, but where do you think Trump, as he wraps this up, where do you think his head is at right now?
You know, from start to finish, this has been a pretty well-run campaign. The Friday after the convention in Milwaukee, there was a campaign operation in Northern Virginia. And I think that the campaign took it very seriously. They hit the ground running, and I was very surprised. It's the best, the best I've ever seen it for a presidential campaign, and all the way through. And Donald Trump is untiring. He's done nearly a dozen rallies since Friday afternoon, including one in Salem, Virginia, to drive up turnout in Southwest Virginia and Northwest North Carolina, and that is going to be very helpful. And we're seeing the benefits of that. We've seen increased enthusiasm, even in a place like Arlington. You know, I've had several dozen people come to me this morning who've said, "We've never seen a Republican out here. This is so exciting. How does it look?" And Arlington voters are highly educated and super clued in, and quite a few of the Republican voters who are quote unquote quiet Republicans. I spoke to a woman about 20 minutes ago, said, "I could never tell my neighbors I'm Republican, but I'm so glad to see you out here." Those people are paying attention to what the Trump campaign has done, and they're very impressed, and they're impressed with the stamina and the drive of Donald Trump all the way through Election Day.
One of the things, there's so many conversations to have, but one of the things that some people are saying, including Megyn Kelly, by the way, who was on stage with Donald Trump last night, is that the gender gap, where you've got a lot of these women that are supporting Kamala Harris, men by and large, of course, Donald Trump has a lot more support among men. But I guess the question is, if Donald Trump loses, and I hope that he's going to win, but if he loses, people are talking about this gender gap and that Trump did not have enough females with him out on the campaign trail. Of course, we know Tulsi Gabbard and others were out on the campaign trail. But Megyn Kelly made her first appearance last night with Donald Trump. Nikki Haley never made an appearance, as far as I know, with Donald Trump. And if she did, she hasn't been out with him extensively. So do you think the worry about a gender gap is a real concern, and could they have done anything differently?
You know, there is a minor concern with the gender gap. What I'll tell you, and this is anecdotal, most of my volunteers today are middle-aged and older women, where I think that the Republican infrastructure and down-ballot candidates can be helpful is to actually create a sense of community. Women organize socially a little bit differently than men, and so it takes women with courage to talk to their friends, to talk to their neighbors about their principles and what they care about. A lot of the cultural conversations that take place will trickle up or trickle into the political space. And so it's really important to have a strong Republican Women's Club. It's really important to empower young Republican women. It's really important to empower Republican women candidates. And just as an interesting statistic, it takes a Republican woman 7 asks before she believes that she's qualified to run for office. And so we should be asking the women in our church, the women in our business, the women in our communities to consider running for office to speak to these issues from the perspective of a woman. Obviously, I'm a guy, Dan. I don't know a lot of the struggles that women experience as mothers, as professional women in the workplace. But they do know those issues, and they do care about our community and our country, and we have to have those conversations and encourage them to build that community around themselves and around their friends to be able to go out and talk about what they care about through the lens of politics and public policy.
Matthew, we only have a minute left. So tonight, let's go through some of the logistics. Georgia, they just came out and said that they may have their results earlier than they thought previously. So that is good news. I kind of want this to be over and done with as quickly as possible. What are you thinking about Pennsylvania? I understand that Pennsylvania's come out and said, we won't know possibly for a few days, who won their state. I don't know what Michigan is saying, but what are your thoughts? When will we know anything about who's going to win this race?
Governor Kemp and the Republicans in Georgia have done a great job tightening things up since the last election. We will know something out of Georgia relatively quickly. If Georgia goes Trump's way, it is looking good for the rest of the country. We will know in Virginia, polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern, so 6 p.m. for most of your listeners. And I think we'll know something, or we'll start to know something around 9 or 9:30 East Coast time. And if Virginia is close and Georgia falls for Trump, then we are looking at a pretty good night for Republicans.
All right. Matthew, how can people follow you on Twitter?
I will be on X all day. Matthew Hurtt, MatthewHurtt.